Okay, chapter 2, the second page in chapter 2, we've got these problems that all have to do with, I'm going to put something across the top of my page. This is all about the idea that we have these vertical angles, and vertical angles are congruent to each other. And this big idea is what leads to how we set up these problems for every one of them on this page. The idea that vertical angles are congruent to each other. I'm going to take and shade in green this pair of vertical angles here. Remember, vertical angles are across from each other. And I'm going to shade in orange. And I could use different markings, but I'm just choosing to use green and orange and just shade what those two things are to lead us to setting up an equation. So vertical angles are congruent to each other. So the fact that I just shaded through the greens, let's focus on the greens first. What equation could I set up knowing that these two are congruent to each other? What's it going to look like if I go and look and see what's here? I've got, you know what, your 13y is fine coming out front. Plus 24. Keep going, Ramaya. Equals the 13y. There we go. So I've got to solve that equation to figure out what y is. And the reality is I've actually got to solve 4 times the quantity x plus 6 equals 5x plus 11 as well. So those are the equations that I'm going to have to solve in order to get the answer to those. I'm going to look ahead at 4. We'll come back and do the math. Vertical angles are congruent to each other. Just using my orange and green again. Vertical angles are congruent to each other. So how about in green? What equation is suggested if these guys are congruent to each other?
Y is 8.
5 times the quantity 3x plus 2 equals 17x. Y might be 8, but until I do some work, I'm not going to know. And then what's my other one going to be? How do I get y?
3y plus 38
3y plus 38 equals 5y. So yeah, I'm just going and setting them up across from each other. And then let me just, I worked all the way over here. I'm going to start working backwards here. I'm going to take 3 y's away from both sides to find this y on number 4. So that's going to leave me with 38 equals 2 y's. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 2 and find out that y is, that's going to be 19. So that's one of the answers. And they're not asking us to go back and use it either. They're just, the direction said, find the values of x and y. If I needed to know what the angles were, I'd have to go back and plug it in, but that's not what we were asked here. And then when I go do the green equation for this one, the first thing I have to do is distribute 15x plus 10 equals 17x. And then from there, I'd take away 15x's. 10 is equal to 2x. And I would divide by 2. Somebody had said x is 8. It sure isn't. It's 5. X is 5. Y is 19. And then again, I know I'm doing these out of order. Let me go over to the orange problem here. I'm going to distribute. So this setup is one thing, and then just using your algebra skills is another. 4x plus 24 comes from the distributive, and that's equal to 5x plus 11. And my preference would be to take 4x's away from both sides. You could start solving this differently. You should still get the same answer I do. 24 equals x plus 11. Take 11 away from both sides. So in this one, x is 13. And then to finish off that problem, let me wrap up this one. I'll take 10 y's away from both sides over here on the green equation. 24 equals 3y. There's your y is 8. It's this problem. And y is 8. So if that's the structure and the setup, I'm still looking at this next group, but these got a little bit more challenging just because there's a couple of interesting things going on. Again, I'm just going to shade, like that's my orange pair. Those are equal to each other, so 7x equals 3x plus 32. I'm just dropping the parentheses because the parentheses aren't showing me that there's anything to distribute. They're just putting that angle measure notation on the outside. There's nothing to distribute. And then if I look across at the other ones, here's the two that are actually both expressed as y. So really the big thing here was just going, okay, these are vertical angles, and then actually what happened in both, y minus 62, what happened in both of them is the vertical angles had the same variable on them. So then when you set them equal to each other, you can just find out what each of those is. I'm going back over here to orange. I'm going to take 3x's away from both sides. 4x is 32. If I divide by 4, that's going to be x is 8 for this one. Now, in the second one on the green, to undo 2/3 times y, I would divide everything by 2/3, but dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. So look what I did. A reciprocal is when I flip it over. Dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its reciprocal. And 3/2 is actually 1 1/2. 3/2 is 1.5. So maybe I just want to, these guys are going to cancel out. Y equals 1.5 times the quantity y minus 62. That might be the easiest way to tackle that. Multiplying everything by 3/2 is the same as 1.5. And then I'm going to go distribute. Y equals 1.5y minus 62 times 1 1/2 is 93. And take a second here because this one's going to take 1 1/2 y's away from both sides. So I'm getting all squished up here. Negative half y equals negative 93. Negative 1/2 y equals negative 93. If I divide both sides by negative 1/2, negative 0.5, y is equal to 186, it works out to be. So using your algebra again. Number 4 presents its own kind of issue because when you look at vertical angles, there's just something that sticks out at me and I'm like, ooh, what am I going to do about that whole thing? Because when I go and shade my vertical angles here, cool, that's all my x's. And then shading here with my y's, I realize there's an x sitting in there. So the best thing to do at this point is let me go find out what x is and then use it before I solve my y equation. Once I know what x is from my orange equation, so to get the x value, I'm going to go and have 20x plus 8 equals 8 times the quantity 3x minus 1. Now I'm going to distribute my 8 on the right hand side. 20x plus 8 equals 24x minus 8. I always like to gather my x's up first. I'm going to take 20 x's away from both sides. 8 equals 24x minus 20, 4x minus 8. Add 8 to both sides. 16 equals 4x. Divide both sides by 4. X is actually 4. Now, I got to go put that in there because then I'll be able to solve for y. Go ahead, Gerard.
Is that y equals 186?
Over here, yeah. I can talk to you about it after. You can go back and check this out, or we can look at it together one-on-one here in a minute. Now, if x is 4, I need to get this x out of this equation, so I need to say it's y minus 23 times 4. Y minus 23 times 4. 23 times 4 is 92. So I need to write this as y minus 92. I'm using the x I found, so now what I have, this vertical angle pair, is going to be half of y equals y minus 92. Now don't forget that a half is 0.5, so maybe you guys just want to do this. 0.5y equals y minus 92. I need all my y's to be on one side of the equation. I'm going to take this y away. That's like taking one y away. I need my y's to be on the same side. Half a y minus 1y is going to give me negative a half y equals negative 92. And then to finish this up, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 0.5. And I'm going to get down to y is equal to 184. Negative 92 divided by negative 0.5 is 184. And I just went to my calculator and did that while you guys were writing. And then make sure that you're following the directions and reading the directions carefully on your exam, because you don't want to be in a position where it says find the values of the angles or find the angle measures, because if it went on to say that, you'd need your x and y, and then you'd have to go back and plug them in and find out what those angles measured. Just make sure that you're reading the directions. And actually, that's what goes on in number 17. In 17, it does tell us, use the diagram to find the value of x and the measure of each angle. So I've got to figure out what x is, then I have to go back and use it. So I'm going to move over here to 17. What I see in 17 is that this entire angle right here is measured off as 140. You know, what part, they don't tell us that these angles are the same. If they told us these angles were the same, they'd both be 70. That'd be easy, but we don't know that. So what we need to do is just put together the quantities that we have for angle ABD. This is angle ABD. And this is, so 3x plus 17. And then I'm going to put it together with 5x plus 11, this angle DBC. Just remember how to name them. I'm going to put that 5x plus 11 together with it, and those all together should be equal to that 140 degrees. Now, if you notice, I dropped my parentheses as I was going from the figure into my algebra problem, because there was nothing outside that was affecting that had to be distributed. So it's just like, let's go put this stuff together. And speaking of putting it together, my first thing is going to be to combine like terms on the left-hand side. 8x's plus 28 equals 140. So I just combine like terms. I haven't even started undoing yet. I'm going to take 28 away from both sides. And that's going to leave me with 8x equals 112. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 8. And that's going to leave me with x is equal to 14. Now this is all fine and good, but the directions to this problem says find the value of x and the measure of each angle. So now I have to go use my 14. And then again, some more notation stuff that we have to be very careful that we're paying attention to. The measure of angle ABD is going to come from 3 times 14 plus 17. 3 times the x value I found plus 17. And that means that the measure of angle ABD winds up being 59 degrees. And then I need to go find the measure of angle DBC. Somebody might just say 140 minus 59, because if this is 59 here, then this would be, we should be getting 140 minus 59. We should be getting 81. Let me just do the math real quick here. The measure of angle DBC is equal to 5 times 14 plus 11, and I hope that 5 times 14 plus 11 is 81, and it sure is. The measure of angle DBC is 81. So the two answers that I would be looking for is all of this, and I would expect to see this work in finding your 14 in order to find the answers.